Warm greetings. Welcome to Heart Stories. May you find yourself and healing through the stories we share. Now, let the journey begin.
They said love makes you blind, but he didn't know it would cost him his home, his career, and almost his life. He was the kind of man people envied in silence. Ethan Wright, CEO of a rising green tech company, featured in Forbes, invited to speak at climate innovation summits. The kind of man who had everything except someone to come home to. His home was sleek, minimalist, silent. His mornings were ordered, calculated. His nights stretched long, filled with glowing screens, soft classical music, and the subtle ache of solitude. He had poured himself into a vision, built a company from the ground up, and along the way, left pieces of himself behind. Then came the night that changed everything. The gala was hosted at a restored art museum, lit with low golden light and the kind of people who moved with confidence and whispered in investor tones. Ethan was there as a keynote donor, one of the faces of clean energy, shaking hands he didn't remember 5 minutes later. That's when he noticed him across the room, standing under a glass chandelier like he didn't belong there, but didn't mind either. Leo, youthful, striking in a way that wasn't loud but lingered. He wore a plain black suit, no tie, collar slightly open, no group, no +1. Just a glass of wine and a story in his eyes. When Ethan approached, Leo didn't try to flatter, he just smiled, said he was studying design, said he loved how architecture could reflect emotion. Ethan, who had sat through hundreds of business proposals, felt something shift. Leo didn't sell himself. He didn't even seem to try. He was, in that moment, everything Ethan had never dared admit he wanted: spontaneous, warm, and full of unknowns. The conversation flowed with ease. Leo spoke of a troubled upbringing, how he paid for college on his own, how his dream was to one day open a small coffee shop with bookshelves and sunlight and art from local kids. Ethan listened, drawn not only to Leo's words, but to the way he made the room disappear. He didn't notice that Leo had no social media presence. He didn't ask why Leo didn't come with friends, or why his stories always landed softly in the space between tragedy and charm. He told himself those things were mysteries, and mysteries were romantic. Within weeks, they became inseparable. Magazines picked up on them, calling them the unlikely power couple. Brains and beauty, vision and vulnerability. Photos of them started appearing on event covers. Ethan, tall and composed in designer suits, and Leo, with his gentle stare and tailored simplicity, his hand resting gently on Ethan's back. The world saw love. Ethan felt it too, or what he thought was love. He ignored the whisper in his gut when Leo declined every invitation to meet Ethan's closest friends. He dismissed it when Leo seemed to change details about his past depending on who was listening. And when someone at the gala later asked if Leo was in PR because he seemed a little too polished to be a student, Ethan just laughed. He didn't want to dig deeper. He thought he was falling in love. What he didn't know was that he was standing at the edge of a carefully built illusion, one he would help fund, nurture, and protect, until it turned on him. And when it did, it would be too late to ask the questions he should have asked at the start. Because charm isn't the same as truth. And when someone feels too perfect, too polished, too beautifully sad in all the right places, it's not a sign to get closer. It's a signal to slow down. Trust should never be given just because someone knows how to be seen. It should be earned, step by step, especially when your heart and your future are at stake. If this story speaks to you, follow Heart Story for more stories that reveal what love hides and how the truth still finds its way home. When someone moves in too fast, you wonder, is it love or a setup? The toothbrush appeared first, a blue one, resting beside Ethan's, barely noticeable. Then came the hoodie on the back of a chair, a phone charger plugged in beside the bed. Little things, harmless things, but they stayed. And after just a few weeks, so did Leo. Ethan didn't ask for a conversation. He convinced himself it wasn't necessary. We're in love, he thought. This is just what people do. And when Leo began spending nights there, cooking dinner barefoot in Ethan's kitchen, sipping wine while jazz played from the built-in speakers, it felt natural, like a page torn from a long-awaited chapter. Leo said it was temporary, said his lease was ending, said it made more sense. Ethan didn't argue. He liked waking up with someone beside him, someone who kissed his shoulder in the morning and whispered dreams in the dark. For a man who once counted coffee mugs as his only companions, this felt like a rival, like warmth. So, when Leo suggested they start looking for a space to open his dream cafe, Ethan offered to help. "Let's invest in your dream together," he said. He meant it. It wasn't just money, it was belief. He added Leo to a secondary credit card. Then came the lease agreement, with both their names, then the house deed. It's modern love, Ethan told himself, even as something inside him quietly curled away from the speed. Friends raised eyebrows. Melissa, his longtime friend and CFO, asked the question he didn't want to hear. "Do you even know this guy?" Ethan brushed it off, calling her cynical. "You sound like my father," he snapped one night, though his father had passed away a decade ago. Still, the seed had been planted. One night, while they were watching a documentary, Ethan brought it up gently. "I think we should talk about finances, just boundaries. Maybe a shared plan?" Leo didn't blink. He laughed softly. "You think I'm using you?" "No," Ethan said quickly. "Just clarity is good, that's all." Leo's smile faltered. His voice dropped. "So you don't trust me?" There was a long pause. Ethan opened his mouth to explain, but Leo's eyes were already wet. "I knew this would happen," he said, standing up. "Every time I try to build something real, people just want to make me feel small." He walked out of the room before Ethan could speak. Later that night, Leo returned with flowers and apologies, tears and trembling hands. He said he didn't mean to overreact, said it was just old wounds talking, said he was scared of losing someone who finally saw him. Ethan, torn between love and logic, chose to believe in love. He didn't ask again. As months passed, Leo's presence grew thicker. Packages arrived in his name. The cafe space was leased and furnished, the payment wired in full from Ethan's investment account. Leo's friends, none of whom Ethan ever met, were suddenly business partners on paper. When Ethan asked about them, Leo brushed it off. "You work all day," he said with a smile. "Let me handle this part." So Ethan stayed in his lane. Work, boardrooms, investors. At night, he came home to wine and soft jazz and stories about espresso blends and reclaimed wood tables. The house felt full, but something about it began to feel fragile, like a structure of glass, transparent but delicate. Too perfect, like one question could make it all fall. And yet, Ethan didn't ask, because the cost of asking, of breaking the spell, felt higher than the comfort of pretending. He wanted love to be simple. He wanted it to be real. But love, real love, doesn't make you feel guilty for wanting clarity. It doesn't turn your concerns into betrayals. It doesn't twist responsibility into shame. What Ethan was learning slowly, painfully, was that manipulation often wears the mask of tenderness. That someone saying "I love you" while avoiding accountability isn't loving you, they're managing you. And what he would come to understand, long after the glass shattered, is this: love can be beautiful. But if it requires silence to survive, it's not love, it's control. The first sign was silence. Ethan woke up to an unusually quiet house. The kind of silence that felt heavy, not peaceful. The kitchen was spotless. No coffee brewing, no faint humming from Leo as he moved about the morning. The front door was locked, the windows still sealed, but Leo was gone. At first, he thought nothing of it. Maybe Leo had gone for a walk or to the cafe. But then Ethan saw at his phone, on the counter, still charging. And that was strange. Leo never went anywhere without it. A text notification blinked briefly before fading. Ethan hesitated, then tapped to open it. It wasn't from a friend. It was a transaction alert. $10,000 had just been withdrawn from one of their joint accounts. Ethan's stomach dropped. He checked his banking app. The numbers didn't make sense. Transfers he didn't recognize. Names he didn't know. And then the realization hit: this wasn't a glitch. It was a pattern. He tried calling Leo, straight to voicemail. He drove to the cafe, closed. No sign of Leo, no sign of furniture. Just an empty shell of a space that had once held dreams and Italian tile. The barista's gone. The place looked as if it had never opened. Panic rising. Ethan rushed back home and tore through the house. Documents were missing. USB drives. The spare key. Leo's clothes. Gone. A glass of wine still sat on the nightstand, half full. but everything else had vanished. The next few hours blurred. The bank confirmed that nearly $4.3 million had been drained over time, in increments large enough to matter, but small enough to avoid instant detection. A few transfers had been made recently using Ethan's credentials, his electronic signature replicated perfectly from previous contracts. Even his stake in the company, carefully protected by layers of security, had been partially reassigned using forged documents submitted under a fraudulent name Ethan had never seen before. But none of it mattered. Everything had been authorized. No break-ins, no threats, just trust. His lawyer said it plainly. There's nothing we can do unless we can prove intent to defraud. Intent. That was the word that echoed through Ethan's mind for days. Intent. Had Leo planned it from the beginning? Was every kiss, every breakfast, every soft look beneath a blanket of jazz music part of the play? Or had it shifted somewhere along the way? Had desperation warped love into strategy? Ethan stopped sleeping. He started scanning old emails, reviewing every file Leo had ever sent. One night, he opened an image Leo once shared plans for the cafe's layout, and something caught his eye. In the corner of the PDF file, metadata revealed the document had been edited from a design firm Leo claimed he'd never worked with. A quick search revealed the firm was owned by a shell company registered to an address that matched the fake name on the financial transfers. It was a thread, and Ethan pulled it. Over the next few weeks, he collected more pieces. Inconsistent tax record, digital footprints, IP addresses. Ethan, the man who had once handed over passwords in bed without a second thought, now sat hunched over spreadsheets at 3 a.m., chasing echoes through the internet. He wasn't sure what he was trying to find: justice, maybe, or closure. But part of him just wanted to understand how he got here, how someone as smart, as careful, as guarded as he used to be, had ended up this exposed. And the answer wasn't in Leo's lies, it was in Ethan's silence. He had ignored every hesitation, every raised eyebrow, every chance to ask the hard questions. Because asking meant risking the illusion. Because deep down, he wanted love to save him from loneliness. And he'd let that desire override his instincts. He hadn't just lost money, he'd lost something harder to replace: his sense of safety in himself. And that, more than anything Leo stole, would take the longest to rebuild. Because loving with an open heart is brave. But protecting your life, your identity, your future is not a betrayal of love. It's a requirement. You can give someone your heart, but you should never hand over the keys to everything you've built without a way to get it back. Not even when they whisper forever. Ethan could have vanished. He could have taken what little was left, sold the house, changed his name, started over somewhere warm and nameless. That might have been easier, safer, but that wasn't who he was, not anymore. Instead, he opened a new file on his desktop. He labeled it Leo Evidence. He wasn't looking for revenge. He was looking for truth. And the truth, it turned out, had fingerprints. Among the digital trail Leo left behind, one thing stood out: a set of design blueprints he had pitched to Ethan early on as part of his cafe concept. Ethan remembered the night Leo showed him candlelight, red wine, promises of a space that feels like healing. At the time, it felt romantic. Now, it felt suspicious. Because that same blueprint, identical down to the hand-drawn arrows, had been copyrighted 6 months earlier under Ethan's name. Part of a side project Ethan had abandoned, one he had shared only once, in a conversation over dinner. With Leo. That was the crack. Ethan reached out to his lawyer again. This time, he wasn't filing a theft claim. He was initiating an intellectual property lawsuit. Ethan had legal records proving that Leo had stolen original content, marketed it as his own, and used it to secure funding under false pretenses. The case was slow, but steady. Ethan didn't stop there. He took his story and turned it into something louder. He launched a quiet online campaign called #TrustFund, a platform for LGBTQ plus individuals who had experienced financial manipulation in their relationships. Anonymous posts, shared experiences, real names withheld. At first, just a few stories, then dozens, then hundreds. The community wasn't just therapeutic, it was proof. Proof that Ethan wasn't alone, and that this kind of betrayal wasn't rare. It just wasn't often spoken about. Shame kept it hidden, and silence kept it repeating. Meanwhile, Leo's reputation started to crack. The cafe's social media presence, built on glossy filtered photos and performative humility, came under fire when users began pointing out inconsistencies. People started asking questions, commenting, connecting dots. The once beloved image of a self-made dreamer faded into something far less noble. Ethan didn't speak Leo's name publicly. He didn't need to. Truth has a way of surfacing. It came to light that Leo's business license was registered under a different identity, that he had applied for a personal development grant using forged references, one of which listed Ethan's old home address. The grant was revoked, his cafe closed for good, and the small group of friends Leo had managed to charm fellow influencers and weekend entrepreneurs slowly distanced themselves. Even his new partner, a well-known lifestyle blogger, severed ties when the headlines became harder to avoid. But Ethan didn't celebrate. He sat in court, months later. As the judge read aloud the ruling, the designs were ruled as Ethan's original work. Damages were awarded, modest compared to what was lost, but enough to matter, enough to restore ownership, enough to mark a line in legal ink: this was yours. This was stolen. After the hearing, Ethan walked past Leo without a word. Leo looked smaller than he remembered, not in stature, but in presence. The arrogance was gone, the charm muted. There was no apology, just a blank stare one Ethan didn't need to decode anymore. Outside, a journalist asked him if justice felt good. Ethan paused before answering. "Justice isn't about feeling good," he said quietly. "It's about knowing the truth still matters." That night, he returned to his apartment, not the house they once shared, a smaller space, simpler, more his own. He opened the #TrustFund inbox, nearly 2,000 new messages. Some were stories of heartbreak. Some were legal questions. Some were simply, "Thank you for making me feel less stupid." Ethan read everyone because he knew what it meant to feel stupid, to feel blind, to feel like you handed your future to someone who never deserved your trust. But he also knew now none of that made him weak. It made him human. And being human means failing, but it also means rising, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because sometimes, justice doesn't come with handcuffs or dramatic endings. Sometimes, justice is quieter. It's knowing your story helps someone else draw a boundary. It's getting your name back on something that mattered. It's walking away with your head up without the weight of someone else's lies on your shoulders. Years passed. The chaos, once so loud, had quieted into memory. The legal battles were over. The headlines faded. People moved on. And so did Ethan. He didn't rebuild what he had lost. He built something different, something better. He no longer lived in glass-walled penthouses or curated perfection. He chose a modest brownstone near the city's arts district, quiet streets, children's chalk drawings on sidewalks, the kind of neighborhood where people smiled when they passed each other. His work had shifted too. The green tech company now had younger minds at the helm. Ethan had stepped back, becoming an advisor, a mentor, but his real passion, his new purpose, was the TrustFund Foundation, a nonprofit offering scholarships, housing stipends, and legal guidance to LGBTQ plus youth who had experienced financial or emotional abuse in intimate relationships. He didn't put his face on the homepage. He didn't need to. The impact spoke for itself. Dozens of young people each year found safety, education, and community through the program. He thought often about how different his story could have been if someone had warned him. If someone had said, "You're not weak for being deceived. You're not alone." Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived, handwritten, no return address, postmarked from a treatment center in Arizona. The penmanship was shaky. Inside was a folded medical document, an intake summary from a facility that specialized in personality disorders. At the top, obsessive financial attachment, narcissistic injury, and relational control. And beneath it, a note, just a few lines. "I know what I did. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even fully understand why I did it, only that I felt safer with control than with love. Thank you for not destroying me when you could have. I hope your kindness reaches someone who deserves it more than I did. I'm sorry. Leo." Ethan stared at the paper for a long time. He didn't feel triumph or relief, just a kind of distant ache, like remembering an old injury after the rain. He placed the letter in a drawer, not to forget it, but not to carry it either. That evening, he walked into the Trust Fund's headquarters, a converted brick building that once housed a library. He stopped in front of the wall just past the entrance, a wall that every visitor saw first. On it was a simple message, printed in serif gold lettering: I lost more than money, but I never lost the ability to believe in kindness, starting with my own. The quote had no author listed, no explanation, and yet, every time Ethan read it, he remembered not the betrayal, not the loss, but the version of himself that crawled out from under it, the man who had once given too much: his heart, his fortune, his trust, and learned how to give again without losing himself. Because forgiveness isn't a gift you give the person who hurt you. It's the freedom you give yourself, so their damage doesn't become your legacy. And the most powerful thing about healing is that it's contagious. Somewhere along the way, Ethan had stopped being the victim of a story. He had become the author of something bigger. Now, when he walked into a room, people didn't see the man who had been deceived. They saw the man who turned his pain into purpose. Have you ever trusted someone and paid the price for it? What did it teach you about yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments and follow Heart Story for more real stories that stay with you.